Welcome back to Raina Teachings. For those of you that are new, my name is Lori Camacho, and I am the Trance Channel to a being named Raina. We make videos on a variety of different spiritual subjects, and we also teach classes to help people through their spiritual process. Today, I will be doing this video outside of trance, and before we get started, I just want to tell you, if you're new, to like and subscribe below. Go ahead and hit the bell if you'd like to be notified of our future videos. We put out a video about once a week. So now to get on to our subject for today. So this may be a little bit of a lengthier video. I really wanted to talk about the process that a person goes through called doing the work. You'll notice that a lot of people use this term when maybe you're new to metaphysics. Oh, well, you need to do the work. So that's a real thing. And a note here on natural psychic ability. So me speaking as a professional psychic, healer, and trance channel, a little bit of natural ability is not enough. So you do need a teacher at a certain point, and you need to work through a foundational studies process in meditation that helps you to go through these very specific subjects that I'm about to talk about. The reason being is it grounds your metaphysics and it grounds the natural ability. So without that, the natural ability can kind of go awry, or you can give your power away to your ego in that way. So that's why this is important. I also want to make a disclaimer that myself and Raina in no way have invented these processes or these subjects I'm about to talk about. You can find them from many different teachers over many different spans of books and different time periods. Raina has a very specific way that she talks about these subjects in our classes. We've actually taught a class for over 14 years that guides somebody through this process. I will actually link that in the description for you if that is something that you're interested in doing. And it has been the foundation to my work with Raina all of this time. So I've taught people to develop their intuition. I've taught people to channel. I've taught people to work with their healing as well, along with Raina. But this foundation has always been staple. And that is the reason, because it grounds your metaphysics. So what is doing the work? What does that mean? So I'm also going to talk about it in terms of how Raina has laid it out. Raina, a long time ago when I was a new channel and I was just learning about these things myself, Raina gave me a very specific timeline. So, and it was because I went through these particular subjects, these things woke up in me in this particular order. So we've always taught them in this particular order. However, you may have one of these subjects come up earlier in your spiritual awakening. And these things do come up in a spiritual awakening for sure. Or if you are just interested in studying spirituality and learning more about it, these subjects are very, very important. So although I will talk about it in this particular order, you may, start with past lives. You may be having a bunch of past lives come in, or you may have these happen to you at different timelines, is what I'm trying to say. So what is doing the work? First, learning about your ego is extremely, extremely important. So the ego is the thing that can get in the way of your spirituality, but it is also a very real part of you that isn't going to go away. So you may have grown up with people talking about the ego and talking about people, oh, that guy has a big ego over there. So we all know what that means when someone says something like that, but it's a lot deeper than that. So your ego is a very ingrained part of your personality, and it's really important for your human life to have an ego. So it isn't going to go away. It has a purpose, but it does not have a purpose in your spiritual process. And that's where the problem can sometimes come in, where your mind goes crazy during meditation, or you feel resistance to doing the work, to working with these other parts of yourself. The ego will try to stop it because it has a particular purpose, and that purpose is to have everything stay the same in your reality every day. So it helps you to do that. It helps you to get to work on time. It helps you to, take care of your kids and do all of these things that are really, really important. So don't sabotage the ego or make it into this bad, horrible thing. It really isn't. It just can get in the way a little bit when it comes to your spirituality. So also learning how your ego functions with you is really important. So your ego is specific to your own personality. So how your personality is how your ego is going to take that and use it in order to help you navigate your reality, but also to help stop you from doing some things that it feels is potentially hazardous. I also want to say Raina goes into a lot more depth into these subjects in our program. I just wanted to list them and talk about what doing the work is here today. It's for those of you that are wondering what it is. So I won't go into too much detail with each subject because I could talk about them for a very, very long time. But I thought it was important to just talk about what they are and so that you understand. So that is the ego. So the next thing that is really important to learn about is your higher self. So your higher self is something that the ego actually initially tries to keep you from learning about. But the higher self is where you get those little intuitive messages from day to day. Oh, well, why don't you, why don't you take this detour today? And then there's a very good reason you need to take that detour. The higher self is very subtle. And it's also, a very important part to your spirituality. It is the reason that you go into learning about your spirituality. The higher self is who you're looking to develop a very deep relationship with. And it's also what it means to develop a relationship to your spirituality, but also to yourself. It has a lot to do with self-love. And your higher self is like a guide on the other side, but it happens to just be you. So imagine that you are this beautiful angelic being on the other side that actually has a lot of wisdom. That is the higher self. So bringing in your higher self brings in your own wisdom into the process of spirituality. And when that happens, your intuition becomes very strong, very accurate, and you begin to think for yourself. So that is why learning about the higher self is really important. The next stage of development would be the inner child. And so now we go into some psychological concepts. And there is a psychological component to this, but it is also as equally important in your spiritual process. You came into this life, you had particular parents, you had a particular foundation that was created for you in childhood. It could be, you could view it as good, you could view it as bad, you could view it as mediocre. In any case, your inner child has a really important part in helping you to create your reality. So they are the magical child. They've been called the magical child. So this part of you doesn't go away. This part of you stays in you and adds depth to, that's why an adult has depth that a child does not have. So this inner child may need healing. This inner child does need healing, is what I will say. It doesn't may need healing. It needs healing on some level. And it also learned how to live life a particular way. So now that you're going through a lot of changes, your inner child may be fearful of some of those changes. Your inner child is a direct link to how you create things. So when you go to create something new, your inner child does that with you. So if you are blocked from your inner child, you will have a block to your creativity. You will feel like you can't do it, or you will just feel like, oh, I'm not really creative. You are, you just need to work with your inner child. The next one, which is similar to the inner child, is the adolescent. So your adolescent is just simply an older child that went through the transition between childhood and adulthood. And now, why is this important to work with the adolescent? Because it is the next stage of development that you had that was very natural. So for an adult, we don't really grow unless we grow spiritually, but a child naturally grows into their next body. So the adolescent is the next body, and you learned about sexuality during that time. You walked away from your childhood during that age, and you learned about how the adult world worked, and you even began to mimic that adult world. And many people stay there. Many people do not grow beyond their adolescent. So young adults are really still largely bigger adolescents that are just still kind of pretending to be adults, if that makes any sense. So the adolescent is really important to work with because they learned about adulthood during that time, yet they were not really adults. So it was a transitionary time, which is really very magical. So as difficult as adolescence can be, it is meant to be that way. And as an adult, as a spiritual adult, you are meant to look back on your adolescence and work with your adolescent in order to heal certain things that maybe they didn't understand or maybe they misconstrued, because they too are part of how you create. They are how you sustain the energy to continue your creation. So they are the endurance, in other words, to that particular creation, even just your spiritual awakening. The next subject that is very, very important beyond this is shadow work. I could do a whole video on just shadow work. I may do a video on some of these subjects for you just to go into a little bit deeper depth. But shadow work is the next subject that is largely talked about by many people, again, psychology as well as spirituality. So, what is shadow work? Shadow work is the things that you have denied within yourself. So, and then we go into childhood again. So, they could be both negative events, they could be positive events, they could be positive gifts that you have within yourself that you have just denied because maybe you were told that that was not a way to be as a child. Oh, don't be so loud. Don't be, don't dress that way. Um, don't show that particular talent because you'll make other kids feel less than. So that's one way that the shadow works, but it also works in the negative too. So you have something called a dark shadow and something called a light shadow. And really, it's just your shadow mixed together, but it's easier to sort of separate them in this way. So there are negative events that you go through in your life, and if there's any trauma that you went through in particular, the shadow will hold it for you until you are in a safe enough place and a safe enough time in your life to let yourself remember those things and begin to heal them and work with them. So the shadow is very, very fascinating. I love working with the shadow, actually. A lot of change comes when you work with the shadow. So, from a spiritual perspective as well, they are also things you've denied in yourself from prior lifetimes. So, it goes deeper than even just this lifetime with the shadow. But the shadow, without doing your shadow work, you will not ground in your metaphysics or your spiritual process. You'll stay kind of flighty and up in the clouds, or the opposite. It's either one or the other. So the shadow really helps to balance you. So you accept the parts of yourself that you've denied that are both not so positive and positive. So, and the positive things come with responsibility too, and that's usually what we're running from. And the negative things, maybe they're not so fun to admit about yourself, but they're necessary so that you can really know yourself and understand how to work through them. So if you are incredibly arrogant, for instance, this is a negative one. If you don't know that about yourself, you're going to play it out in your life with other people and project that onto other people and wonder why you're surrounded by arrogant people, because you're that way and you need to face it within yourself. So it is not a fun thing to work with always, but it is definitely necessary and grounds your metaphysics. So the next thing is soul and spirit. So, like the shadow, the soul and spirit is combined. You don't have a soul without a spirit, but it works a little bit differently. So, your soul is the thing that holds your consciousness for this lifetime. So, your higher self lets go of a certain amount of consciousness that your body's going to work with and understand and learn with. And that goes into the soul. So that's why people talk a lot about soul searching and things like that. You actually, when you do soul searching, you really go in and learn about the many different spirits that you have. So you have one soul, but spirit, the spirit side is the masculine side to everything. And it's the doing side of your creative energy. So the soul is the creation side, and the sitting with it and the holding your consciousness part, where the spirit carries it out into the world. So that both of those are extremely important to work with. And again, this subject can be very complicated. Raina talks about it beautifully. But you have many, many different spirits that you've come in with in this lifetime. So there's many that have followed you from prior lifetimes and are continuing their work now. And so they file into the soul and work with you. So that is another component of doing the work. Next is past lives. I, at one time, didn't even believe in past lives because I was raised in a Christian church, and that's just not a belief system that we had. Reincarnation did not exist. So, lo and behold, to my surprise, when I was going through a spiritual awakening, I started seeing a bunch of past lives that I had lived. And I knew that they were real. I knew that what I was seeing, my higher self was showing them to me left and right on a daily basis when I was about 26 years old. And it was a little unnerving to go from not believing in past lives at all to all of a sudden seeing, I don't even know how many I saw. That was one of the first things that woke up in me, is these past lives. And the importance of past lives is you've been here before. You've been here, and chances are, if you are seeking out spirituality in any way and you're having a spiritual awakening, it's because you are continuing your spiritual awakening from your prior lifetimes. So, and we've been everything. So, we've been nice people, we've been mean people, we've done terrible things, we've done wonderful things, and we're here to integrate all of it. And so, past lifetimes is part of that. You also carry over themes from past lifetimes. So, if you have not healed a particular pattern from a past life, it's going to follow you here. And so that is why it's really important to work with past lives. You can go into meditation with them and actually rework your past lifetime into something that is, positive or healed if it was not a healed situation. And it will change it in this current life that you're having. The last thing that we are going to mention is future selves. So, working with your future self. And this is also a really fascinating one. I have worked with many different future selves. And as you are creating your life and you're working with your metaphysics and you're, developing a relationship to your higher self, your future self can change. It is based on the energy that you are putting into your life right now. So we have a plethora of different future selves that we could be creating. And what I mean by future self is not a future reality that you're going to live in once you die and come back. I'm talking about your future self now. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now. So what you are doing in your life right now determines the future self that you're going to become. And the reason it's so fascinating and wonderful to work with is you can go into meditation with your future self and they can help you. They can tell you if they're not a great future self, they can tell you why, what choices they made, and maybe what you could do differently. Or if you do see a future self that is, really amazing and doing something you can't even imagine doing, then they can tell you how they did that too. I have a 8-year-old son, and sometimes I will go into trance and Raina will guide him through meditations. And he actually met with his future self. Yesterday we did this. And Raina doesn't give him a lot of guidance because she wants him to just have his own experiences right now at his age. And he was able to see himself as a 35-year-old. And he got a really amazing message from his 35-year-old self. So that means he's creating that reality right now. So that is really the foundation to what doing the work is. There's a lot of different ways to do the work. There's a lot of different ways to meditate and have these things come up. You'll find that sometimes if you cry, or you have an instance where you spontaneously have emotion come up from your meditation, you may have a vision about one of these things. That's one way to do it. Healing is another way to do it. I find going into meditation and directly working with these parts of self. So it also has another name called parts work. I didn't hear about that for a really long time. I was already channeling before I heard that term, but it's another term that's been given to this, parts work. And it is by far the most important thing that you can do, is to learn to work with these different parts of yourself. If you don't, and you just choose to, well, I'm naturally psychic, I'm just going to work on that part, that you will always be limited. So if you want to, whether you want to do this professionally or not, doesn't really matter. Everyone has to go through the deep healing process in order to get where they're going. So if it is your path to do this professionally in some way, you have to do this work. And if it's your path to do something else, you don't have to do this work, but it will give you a lot more depth as a person, a lot more depth as a metaphysician, and a lot more depth as a light worker, if that's what you're choosing to do. So I've taught thousands of people over the years, and for 14 years, this has been our process. And there is not one person I have come across that did not need to do this work. Not one. There's plenty of people that have said, oh, I don't need to do that. But once they're in the process of it, they realize how important it is. And it really is a very cathartic experience to go and work with these different parts of yourself. So if you are so inclined and you would like to work with Raina on this particular foundation, it is called the Sage Spiritual Foundation foundation course on our website. Again, I will link it below. And another way to get to it is through our membership. So the Alchemist membership is what I actually suggest, because you could do that program along with everything else. And I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of it. Have a good night.